you gorgeous individuals? It's Cobb here, and today I'm going to be walking you all through my January ARCS. If you're new here, Walk Through My ARCS is a series I do on my channel where essentially I talk about a number of ARCS that I have received over a period of time, generally a month or a season, in order to kind of make the videos shorter and instead not give you all 5 back-to-back 20-minute reviews, and instead just combine it all into one shorter video that gives you a snapshot into some books that I've read recently. So first of all, I want to thank my friend Ria for being behind the camera and helping me film this video. And also I want to address why this video is coming out a bit late. So essentially I was expecting a February ARC and I was going to do a walk through my winter ARCs with 4 books, but that ARC never came, and this is not shade at anyone. It was actually sent to me. I think it's the post office's fault that it's not here, because I don't know why it's not here. So this isn't throwing shade at anyone. Sometimes malfunctions happen and it's totally okay. But I just wanted to let you know that I wasn't shirking my responsibilities. I put off these books as long as I possibly could to try to make sure that I could do all 4 books together. But it started to reach the end of January and I didn't want to shirk my responsibilities for these books. Plus I was also really excited to read them. So I decided that I should just go ahead and read them and talk about them with you all. So I have 3 books I'm going to be talking about today, and let's just jump right into it. So the first book I'm going to be talking about is The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi, a young adult historical fantasy novel that came out on January 15th of 2019. So The Gilded Wolves is a novel that follows a 6-person heist crew that also deals with political intrigue and fantasy elements along with that in a historical version of Paris. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, unsurprisingly to anyone, because Roshni Chokshi is truly one of the most talented YA authors out there at this moment. She just has a way with words that makes them sound so beautiful and atmospheric, and that is something that really lends itself beautifully to fantasy, and especially fantasy set in an atmosphere like this. But by far, my favorite aspect of this was the 6-person heist crew. In this novel, we follow Severin, a biracial, more specifically French-Algerian heist leader who is essentially the leader of this crew, and he is a product of a lot of trauma and emotional abuse that he underwent as a child and is now trying to get what he deserves. Then there's Layla, who is a South Indian and more specifically Tamil, which is cool because that's the first time I've ever seen my culture represented in any sort of media, so props to Roshni Chokshi for that. Made-up girl, who's kind of the caretaker of the group. She is truly a fashion icon, and she is a brilliant actress, and she really is the mother figure of the group. She cooks for them. She's the one who makes sure that they're staying sane through all of the chaos that they have to undergo. Then there's Enrique, who is a Filipino-Spanish historian who loves to make bad jokes and to share his love of history with his friends. Enrique is someone who really struggles with his identity being biracial and being white passing, and he doesn't feel like he fits in anywhere. Then there's Zofia, a Jewish-Polish mathematician who really struggles with social interaction, and from my interpretation, I think that she has some kind of condition that is why she struggles with social interaction, such as being on the autism spectrum or having an anxiety disorder, but that is just my interpretation. It's not something the author has confirmed, I don't believe. So Sophia has someone who was bullied and taunted and escaped that situation and is now one of the members of this heist crew. Then there's Tristan, who is Severin's adopted younger brother. He is a botanist who really loves his tarantula far too much, and in spite of the fact that he is a genuine sweetheart, the first thing he was born into this world was abuse from the person who was supposed to love him the most. And finally, there's Hypnos, who is a biracial, he's half Haitian, exquisitely queer diva, and he was by far my favorite of this crew, which is interesting because Hypnos is actually kind of the oddest fit. He's very flamboyant, very out there. He is completely a jokester. All he does is make jokes, really. He doesn't really help the situation at all. But I adored his character, and when I found out he was queer, I was even more excited. So that is the crew that takes us through the journey of this book. They take us through a journey that is set in this funny atmosphere with characters that have great lines, but it also is a very dark atmosphere, and it's beautifully woven, and I love the fact that it took place in Paris because I have a thing for Paris, being someone who speaks French and who knows about that, and someone who loves fashion. Paris is kind of like one of the fashion capitals of the world. It's a place that I really want to visit, so I really love the atmosphere of this novel, and I feel like what Roshni Chokshi was trying to build. She picked the perfect location to set that in. Along with the character dynamics and the world building, I also loved the relationships between the characters because they were so well done. And I mean the romantic relationships because there are two romantic relationships that are somewhat prevalent in this novel, but I also mean the friendships, such as Layla and Zophia's sisterly bond and Tristan and Sephirin's brotherly bond. It was all just so well represented and so heart-wrenching and just beautifully done. So I think that the plot of this novel is exquisite. It manages to find this balance between reality and fiction very well because it deals with heavy themes including colorism, including a corrupted government, sexism, and trauma, and it deals with a lot of heavy themes, but it also balances that with the fantasy and the magic and just the sheer atmospheric goodness. I've heard from a lot of people that The Gilded Wolves is one of the best books they've read recently, especially one of the best fantasy books they've read recently, and I can tell you that all those people are right. Roshni Chokshi is so talented, and if you have the ability to, I highly recommend you pick this one. The next book I'm going to be talking about is The 11 Lives of Rukhsana Ali by Sabina Khan. This is a young adult contemporary novel that was released on January 29th of 2019. The 11 Lives of Rukhsana Ali follows the story of a 17-year-old Muslim Bangladeshi lesbian teenager, Rukhsana, who has great dreams of leaving her current situation, going far away to college to study science with her girlfriend Ariana, until her parents discover her sexuality and basically yank all her dreams away from her. I also gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and I was so excited for it to come out because this is not a narrative often talked about in media. And let's just talk a little bit more about it before I get into the sappy part of this review. So first of all, I just want to say that Rukhsana was the perfect main character. She is a mature young woman who is comfortable in her sexuality as a lesbian, but willing to acknowledge the dangers associated with it, especially in her community. She is someone who is proud of her culture and her heritage, but she also acknowledges that there are issues with it and she calls them out. She has these dreams of achieving her happy ending, and she is so willing to work towards that. And I loved reading a narrative from a character who was this mature after going through everything she went through, because I think that that's something I could relate to, being a 17-year-old lesbian myself. So I think that that was really well done in this book. It's also physically an easy read in terms of the wording, the sentence structure. It's very easy to read and it's very contemporary-esque, kind of cut and dry in a sense, but cut and dry in a good way, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure if this is the best explanation, but I just think that physically it's an easy read. It's easy to consume and to digest, which is a good balance between the heavy thematic content of the book, because it does deal with a lot of heavy content, and I want to warn you all about that. It deals with homophobia, it deals with racism, it deals with colorism, it has a hate crime in it, it deals with emotional abuse. It's not an easy read, and I wouldn't want to tell you that it is, but all of these things are challenged. None of them are okayed in this book, and I was very impressed with how Khan handled those topics in this book. First of all, she did a great balance between the good and the bad, which I kind of alluded to with Rukhsana's character, but Khan manages to celebrate brown culture, South Asian culture. She celebrates it in a beautiful way while also calling out issues with it. She calls out the homophobia of Rukhsana's parents and other family members. She calls out the sexism that can often be in South Asian culture, but she also celebrates it. She treasures South Asian food, she loves South Asian fashion, and she shares South Asian characters who are also so supportive of Rukhsana. They're not all homophobic. That is an important depiction, because too often in media, especially in a Western society like America, we only see brown people as one thing. We only see people from another society as one thing, and Khan shows them as well-developed, well-rounded individuals who can make up their own minds, that aren't all a monolith. No one group of people ever is. She also handles the lesbian factor very well. Another issue Rukhsana faces is that her friends aren't very understanding of her situation with her family. They don't understand why she can't just come out. And she handles that dynamic very well and represents it in a real way that I think can relate to a lot of brown kids growing up in a Western society, because it's hard to adjust and to adapt when sometimes you are the only person who represents your culture, and she talks about that so well in this book. What she does really well is she makes everyone well-rounded. No one is one-dimensional. Everyone is well-rounded and well represented and no one is flat. On the front of this cover, Sandhya Menon, the author of One Timplement, which is one of my favorite books ever, she blurbs it by saying, "This book will break your heart and then piece it back together." And I don't think anything better represents my experience reading this book, because it dealt with so much heartbreaking content, it dealt with so much hard content, but it also had a happy ending. And I think that that's important to share because, again, a lot of thematic content like this doesn't have a happy ending, and I feel that it's important for queer readers who might pick this up to know that. So I don't think it's a spoiler by saying that, because I know that that's a discussion in the community. I think that this book just handles everything beautifully, and I don't know what research Khan did going into this. Obviously she is Muslim herself, so a lot of this came from her own experience, but I don't know how she managed to get the queer aspect of it so well, but she really straddled the cultural lines beautifully. I have read books before where queer characters have been kicked out of their house, not accepted by their parents, but I've never read it for a brown queer character. Those cultural intricacies matter, and that's what Khan represents really well in this book. So I know it's a hard read, and I'm not gonna take away from that, so if you can't handle this content, of course be aware of that, but if you can, I really, 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 truly recommend you pick this one up, because it's January and I can already say it's one of my favorite books of the year. The last book I'm going to be talking about is The Music of What Happens by Bill Conisberg, which is also a young adult contemporary novel that was released on January 29th of 2019. This is actually one of the few unsolicited ARCs that have been sent to me, but I think it was sent to me because it's gay, which is always welcome. The Music of What Happens is, as I mentioned, a young adult contemporary that features an opposites attract romance between two characters, Max and Jordan, who both have their own fair share of struggles. Max is a Mexican gay athlete who has a night that he truly doesn't want to remember, and Jordan is a gay poetry writer who has an unstable mother. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. There were a lot of things I loved and there were a few things I didn't. Before going any further, I do want to give a content warning for rape, because that is a theme in this novel, and of course it's challenged, but it is something to be aware of before reading it. So in the author's note before the book, Conisberg writes about his struggle with masculinity versus femininity as a gay male and what makes it okay to be gay. That was really what he wanted to represent in this novel, with a character who is as macho and typically masculine as Max versus a character who is a lot more feminine like Jordan, and I think that that was a beautiful theme to strive to represent in this book. I loved the connection between the two characters. This truly was a romance where the partners made the other the best version of themselves they could be, and I think that that is one of the best things about love, and it should be what love is, and that was so beautifully represented in this novel. Their hilarious banter, their willingness to get serious and supportive when necessary, and their kind of hate-to-love story was just beautifully done. But in doing so, Conisberg did not shirk the other relationships that are also important. The ride-or-die best friends also contribute their own share of hilarious banter to the story, which really gives a light sense to this contemporary novel. I also really liked how this novel was light in a way, but it also dealt with heavy themes. It dealt with colorism, it dealt with racism, it dealt with the theme of rape, which I think it did very beautifully. It raised important questions, and it also emphasized the fact that rape is never the survivor's fault. It emphasized that a lot, and that's very important. But on the other hand, there are two things I struggled with. The first is that the writing of this novel is somewhat all over the place, and it's also a book that kind of tells and not shows versus showing and not telling. So I felt that the writing style needs a little bit more work. And the other thing that bothered me is that it used a trope I deeply do not like. It used the trope of the unstable parent. I struggle to talk about this because I think that that is a reality for people. I have seen it be a reality for people where a parent has some sort of mental health condition or some other issue where they are not present. But the issue is that so often in media, that is the only representation of mental illness there is. And when mental illness is only showed in a negative light like that, and not in the fact that a parent can actually seek help, or that it can be a different sort of relationship where someone has a mental illness, it just bothers me, and it's a trope that I personally don't like. So I did have trouble reading that in this book. And despite the fact that I loved a lot of the hilarious banter, a few things that were said just rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it's because I don't know enough about typical cis boy interactions, but a few of the things said just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. In spite of all of that, I do think that this book had a lot of good themes. I just think that the execution could have been a bit better. Okay, so those were the 3 arcs I had to share with you all today. I really hope you guys are enjoying this series because I love talking about the books that I am so fortunate to receive and review, and I love giving these kind of snapshots of them. I want to say a big thank you to the publishers who are willing to send me arcs of Roxana Ali and of The Music of What Happens, and to my friend Cameron Garrett, who was willing to send me the arc of The Gilded Wolves, because all of them are books that really matter. The Gilded Wolves is the first time I've seen representation as someone who's South Indian. The Love and Lies of Roxana Ali is about a brown lesbian, and The Music of What Happens deals with a lot of important themes pertaining to gayness, so I'm very glad I got a chance to read them and to share them with you all. But that's about all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe because that stuff makes me happy. And as usual, all of our social media and my Goodreads will be in the description below if you'd like to follow me anywhere else. And again, a big thank you to my friend for filming this video, and I will have links to my Goodreads reviews of these books in the description below as well for you to check all of those out if you'd like a little bit more information about how I felt reading them. But with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely day and night wherever you are. Please remember that you are beautiful and you deserve the world, and I'll see you soon for a brand new video.